Hello, you guys, and welcome to another episode of Priority Me podcast. I'm your host, Gloria, and I'm so happy to have you back. Today's episode is all about the art of being alone without feeling lonely, which is something that many of us struggle with. Even myself, I've struggled with it for quite some time. I'm 26, but it definitely really hit hard into my early 20s. And I just want to share the tips and tricks that I've learned along my journey and to where it's gotten me to where I am now. But especially in this fast-paced, hyper-connected world, it is so easy to feel like the outcast. It's so easy to feel disconnected from one another. And we're just going to get down to the nitty-gritty of how to overcome this feeling and how to step into solitude and how to enjoy our own company, find a deeper connection to ourselves and a deeper connection to the people around us. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel or started following my podcast, definitely do so because I have a lot of fun episodes coming up and I would love for you to be a part of it. And if you haven't rated the episode, definitely make sure to do that because it helps me tremendously, and just know that I'm so grateful for your support. Nonetheless, let's dive deep into the difference between being alone and feeling lonely and discussing practical tips and mindset shifts to help you embrace solitude and help you thrive in your own company. So let's go ahead and dive first into the definition of being alone and feeling lonely. It's crucial to grasp the definitions effectively so we can manage our emotions effectively with one another. Being alone is simply being by yourself physically, not in the presence of other people. So going for a walk, spending an evening at home alone, taking a walk in the park alone. And it's basically just when you're not in the presence of other people, you're not actively hanging out with another person. That is what being alone is. Feeling lonely, on the other hand, is a deeper emotional state where you feel disconnected and isolated and can even happen in the presence of others. Imagine being at a party where you're surrounded by a lot of people. You might be surrounded by friends and family, but there's a deeper feeling in you where you don't feel connected to them. You might feel like no one understands you. You might feel unseen. And especially if you feel like no one is truly connecting with you. I've definitely felt this, is being in a group of people, and yet no one truly actually is connecting with me on a deeper level. It's very surface level conversations. It's really nothing beyond that. Not that every conversation has to be that, but it's very important that we have those connections in our lives, and not only outward relationships, but also having an inward relationship to yourself. It is very, very important because you can have all of the friends in the world, and if you don't have a connection to who you are and a relationship to yourself, then that feeling of disconnectedness and isolation can also then come when you are by yourself. There's a very common misconception with being alone. Society often wrongly associates being alone to being antisocial or being undesirable. We've all heard the phrases, well, don't you have any friends to go and hang out with? Or why are you always spending time by yourself? And these very negative misconceptions can lead to those feelings of isolation. It can almost lead to the feelings of wondering if you're doing something wrong, even when being alone is not a negative experience. In fact, I oftentimes prefer to be alone than to be in a group full of people that I'm not connecting to, because I know that if it's one thing I can provide to myself, it is that I can provide a deep connection to who I am, and I can take myself out on a walk and feel fulfilled, and I can go to the bookstore and feel fulfilled. I can go sit at a coffee shop and feel fulfilled. And yet I have done those things maybe with the wrong person and felt so empty. It's very important to understand that there are so many negative misconceptions on just spending time alone, but understand that you don't have to identify with those misconceptions and you don't have to give in to those. When we take in and believe those misconceptions, it can then cause lots of loneliness and feeling like you're doing something wrong when there's nothing wrong with being alone. It can actually be a very beautiful and powerful and positive experience in your life to have. You know, there's been times where I talk about my day with someone and they ask, well, who did you go with? Were you by yourself? And I'm like, yeah, I went by myself. I did these things by myself. And almost like the reaction that I got from them is definitely those misconceptions. And I understand, you know, there are lots of people in our lives that do care about us and they want the best for us. But a lot of the times it's really them projecting on to you the things that they can't do. I do believe that being alone, and not only being alone, but being comfortable with being alone, is such a powerful thing to do in today's society. I believe having a relationship to yourself is one of the most beautiful things you could possibly do for yourself. That not a lot of people know that. Not a lot of people truly believe that. So when you've nurtured and flourished that relationship to who you are, someone might come in and then give those misconceptions. And it happens to me all the time. I go get my nails done, or I go have a little day with myself, the first reaction tends to be, well, who'd you go with? I went by myself and I had a great time, by the way. You should try it. And spending intentional alone time can unlock the potential to so many things like self-discovery and growth in our own solitary moments. So it's very important that we recognize being alone physically doesn't necessarily mean that we are lonely. Let's go ahead and explore how we can cultivate a positive relationship to ourselves and how we can sustain the positive relationship to ourselves. This is the foundation. This is the groundwork of being able to enjoy our own company and being able to have those beautiful moments of solitary growth. Take a moment to really reflect on what are your strengths, values, and interests, and what are some qualities that you love about yourself. For example, I love my ability to be able to face challenges head on, and I also love my ability to be able to have empathy with others while they're in a season of their life that might not be the most easiest. I love that I'm able to have resilience in tough times in my life. And I love that I'm always able to be a good friend to someone that's in need. If you're having trouble figuring out your strengths, your values, and your interests, I want to take maybe a step back and maybe zoom out just a little bit, because a lot of the times we tend to take on what others put onto us. So a lot of us might take onto the values of what our parents had, or what your significant other has, or what interests they have. But really being able to figure out what are the things that you like. Be able to really sit down with that. And the next best way that I would say, if you don't have the answer to that just yet, the next best thing I would advise is to really allow for self-discovery to happen. Activities that help promote this self-awareness and being able to figure out what are your strengths and what are your interests and values is two of my favorite activities that I love to engage in as much as possible, which is journaling and meditation. These practices allow us to really tune into our thoughts and allow us to really tune out a lot of the extra noise. We're always constantly overstimulated by coworkers, by friends, by family members, by everything going on around us, that if we take at least 5 to 10 minutes a day and we can sit down with our thoughts, we can maybe journal about our day, we can maybe meditate before the day even starts, then we can really start to foster a deeper understanding of who we are. If you are someone that struggles with sitting down, or you don't have a lot of time on your hands and you're not able to really sit down, pick up a pen and start writing, then you might even want to just go on a quiet walk. Don't even take headphones with you and go on a nature walk and really try and listen to what naturally comes to you. And it might be bills and it might be a lot of stress that is going on in your life, but allow the noise to just eventually, it's going to surpass. And then eventually you're going to figure out things about yourself that you haven't truly gotten the chance to know. Maybe ask yourself, is this really something that I like, or is it something that I've identified with? Is it something that I've picked up from another person and then made it my own? But is it something that I actually care for? But I would definitely say is to take the time to really foster that deep connection with yourself, foster that time for yourself, and sit in silence. There was a time in my life where I knew that I had trouble sitting in silence because I would sit in silence and it would make me feel uncomfortable. That's exactly how I was able to really find a big weakness of mine. A funny way that I actually shut out the silence was that I would turn on the TV. And the show that I would watch was Impractical Jokers. It tricked my brain into like feeling less alone. But interestingly enough, I learned that I absolutely could not stand the sound of silence. It was very deafening. But I couldn't have done that without sitting in the silence and being uncomfortable with it. But now, hours go by, days go by. I don't need to have that external stimulation going on all the time, because I was able to really, really work through that. But definitely sit with yourself and allow those uncomfortable feelings to arise. Allow those things to come to you while you're sitting down. And one of my favorite meditation apps that I use is Calm, C-A-L-M, Calm app. My favorite meditation to take is with Tamara Levitt. That's her name. I started off on 10-minute guided meditations, but start small and really try and learn about who you are, what are your strengths, your values, and your interests, and then start to remove those layers of what people laid on you and the expectations that people have of you, because ultimately it's not about what anyone wants you to do, but it's about what truly feels right for you and honest for you and the best for you. And if it's not hurting or harming anyone else or yourself, then continue to dig deep into that, because it's not about discovering who we are, but it's about rediscovering who we are after all of the noise and the layers got laid upon us. So I advise 5 to 10 minutes, unplug from all the noise and plug in. There's going to be a lot of removing of who you are not to really discover who you are. And what I mean by that is, as you're getting to discover who you are or rediscover who you are before all of the judgment and the opinions and everyone's input, you might realize that you have been living a life that wasn't fully authentic and honest to yourself. I think it's natural that a lot of us want to be accepted by others. It's in human nature to want to be included. But I also don't think that it's right to want that and also abandon yourself in the process. You don't need to abandon the things that you like because it's not what's popular, because it's not what's trendy. You don't need to adopt everything that's trendy or adopt every opinion that's thrown at you and identify it as yours. There's no rule book. And the only rule book that should be is the rule book of authenticity and the rule book of who you are and being true to that. So understand that it's okay to give yourself compassion and to treat yourself with kindness and the same understanding that you would offer to a loved one or to a friend. Give that to yourself because you are so deserving of that love and that kindness. I remind myself that we all make mistakes and that none of us are perfect and none of us are meant to be perfect. The journey to really loving yourself is honestly the journey to respecting yourself. And in order to get that, you need to start by respecting yourself now. Let's get to my favorite part, which is exploring the joy in solitude. One of my favorite things is spending time by myself. I get so much energy from it. It's actually one of the biggest energy givers. One of the things that I always say is that introverts get their energy from spending time alone, whereas extroverts get their energy from socializing with people. I lose a lot of energy when I socialize with a lot of people. There are times like around the holidays especially where I have to go on a full, even 2-week long where I don't see anyone besides maybe my partner, of course, because we live together. But other than that, I don't really care to make any plans. I don't really care to go, and I can't. Like, I physically cannot. And you can see it on my face. And I'm not having a bad time necessarily. I'm just not having the best time. And I want to be my best self. So to be my best self, I need to spend time by myself. There was a time in my life where I was never able to do that. I was actually masking in my early 20s a lot. I would not be able to spend time by myself. And even at the times that I felt socially drained, I would then bring in alcohol into the situation to kind of help me be more myself, with air quotes, be more myself, because obviously that's not who I truly was. But through that is what really helped me into figuring out that I really needed to change. There are so many benefits to solitude, and which, by the way, I want to say very quickly that on my TikTok, I do have a set of practices, and I've titled it Loneliness into Solitude, 100 Days of Loneliness into Solitude. And this was by far one of my biggest challenges that I've really put myself to doing, but I've also felt so fulfilled from it. And I haven't fully completed the 100 days, but what it was is that every day I challenged myself to do something alone, but to find joy in doing that thing alone. So I switched it up and I started very small, even like going for a bike ride, packing up my book and packing up a little picnic and going to sit in the park. To then I started going to the movies alone. And then another one, I started even going to the art museum alone. And I even vlogged all of these things. So on top of being alone, I had to deal with the challenge of vlogging myself and kind of catching some funny stares from people. But regardless, it was such a good time. But if you do want a visual, or if you do want a little bit of inspiration on this journey, definitely check it out. It's 100 Days of Solitude on my TikTok page. Remind me that I need to get back to it because I had such a good time. It was such a fun time. I just want to very quickly say, I think one of my most favorite things that I did by myself was I took myself out on a date and I sat at the restaurant. I was waiting on the server to take my order, and it was a Friday night and it was so full, but it was one of my most favorite Italian restaurants. I had been sitting there for about 40 minutes. The server never came. I had to kind of switch gears a little bit. I ended up leaving, which is fine. I ended up leaving, and there was a burger spot on the way home, and I just walked to the burger spot. I got myself a humongous burger. I got like a double patty, extra fries on the side, Diet Coke, entree, and I loved every second of it. It felt like such a fun little adventure for myself. Before I went to the burger spot, I actually did stop at a little bar. This was at the time that I wasn't really practicing my sobriety, but either way, it was such a good time, and it's something that I always look back on. A lot of great artists have actually credited their breakthroughs in their artwork to them spending time alone. And if that's not enough of a reason to why you should practice solitude and why you should practice spending time alone, then I don't know what is. Because that is such a beautiful thing, is to be able to create a fertile ground for your creativity, especially if you're a creative person. But not even that. I feel that a lot of us are creative down to our core. Naturally, that's who we are. And as we grow older, we tend to become disconnected to that part of us. But this is why it's beautiful to rediscover yourself, is that you're able to reconnect with yourself and you're reconnecting with your childlike self. You can practice these solo activities and it doesn't need to be anything crazy or extravagant. It can be starting very, very small, taking very small baby steps, because I understand, even looking back, how going to a coffee shop gave me so much anxiety just because I overanalyzed everything. Where was I going to sit? What was I going to order? Made sure I have everything on me. I had my chapstick. I had my debit card. I had my license. I had my keys. I had my charger. And I would overanalyze absolutely everything. And let me just tell you, there's nothing wrong with that. It is 100% normal. That's why it's so important that you recognize it's baby steps. But that's why it's so important that you give yourself the compassion, especially in your early stages of really trying to spend time by yourself, because I understand how defeating it can be and feeling like something is wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with you. You deserve to take up space and you deserve to face any anxieties that you might be feeling around spending time by yourself. I mean, we do live in a world where we have this negative misconception of spending time by yourself. It always feels like when you're hanging out by yourself, someone is judging you. The thing is that whether or not they're judging you, it all comes back down to how much you love yourself enough to cultivate a relationship to who you are and discover who you are. So start small. If an overcrowded coffee shop gives you anxiety, don't go to an overcrowded coffee shop. Grab a book. If you're a reader, if you're not a reader, buy some art supplies from your local art store, or I go to Michael's and they have very cheap stuff. You could probably even go to the dollar store and get like very cheap stuff. Set up your blanket, have a little snack, take a little Lunchable. Whatever it is, and set up your area. You could even people watch it, but anything that resonates with you and where you are in your journey right now. Last weekend, my fiance and I went to Dallas for his business trip. So he was very busy with his meetings and these conferences that he was in. I was at the hotel by myself, where old me would have been very anxious about it. And I probably would have stayed at the hotel all weekend, slumbered away, not really caring, and could have also just felt very sad, maybe even anxious to leave the hotel by myself, just because I didn't want to be alone. But it was incredibly therapeutic. I found myself in such a creative process. I was able to catch up with a very good friend of mine. I was able to catch up with my sister. But most importantly, regardless, I was still able to be alone by myself and be okay with it. I was able to be comfortable in my own company, and I wasn't running away from the silence. I wasn't running away from myself. And if I had no plans that weekend, I would have been 100% okay with spending time by myself. I've allowed myself to be completely absorbed in the moment when I'm by myself. So while solitude has its benefits, it's very important to understand why we need to cultivate community as well. When I say the word community, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed with the idea that you have to have a lot of people in your life, that you have to have an overwhelming amount of friends. It's not even about the quantity of people that you have in your life, but the quality of people. I personally myself don't have a ton of friends, but the friends that I do have, they provide so much value in my life and vice versa. But I can say that each one of them brings so much quality to my life. Focusing on nurturing deep connections and meaningful connections rather than collecting a large number of acquaintances, a large number of people that you know, helps you to surround yourself with people that are going to uplift you and encourage you and will help you into stepping into the best version of yourself. I think one of the biggest reasons that I struggled with having a genuine community around me was that I was skipping all of the beginning steps that we went over. And I was trying to skip to the very end, which is nurturing community and having community. I wasn't able to have a community that supported and loved me because I didn't know how to support and love myself. I say this because I would run to the wrong friends when things got difficult, and they didn't know how to nurture me because those weren't the people that I needed to be around. I knew that I was missing something. I knew that we were missing deep, meaningful connections to one another, but I masked it in the name of community. What I have to say about that is that it's never going to be enough. It's never going to be enough. There's always going to be something missing. That's why we come back to the beginning of the video, which is a lot of us can feel lonely in a group full of people because we're lacking that community, we're lacking that connection. So it's almost like such a beautiful domino effect is getting to know who we are and understanding our strengths, our values, and our interests then helps us to align with better friendships that also have similar strengths, values, and interests. It doesn't have to be the most perfect friendship, but when you can find like-minded individuals and you have that sense of belonging, it does help ease those feelings of loneliness. But you want to make sure that you fully do understand who you are. Otherwise, you'll be hiding behind a number of things that are not really who you are. A couple of ways that I've been able to really reach out for community and to put myself in places where I can make a new friend is as simple as signing up for a pottery class. I was taking pottery classes and I would go to class every Monday night. It was from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Everyone of all ages in that class. And it was pretty cool to get to know everyone from different stages in life and just to kind of get a different perspective. You don't have to be best friends with everyone you meet, but even having a close acquaintance is perfect. One night, my fiance and I were going out to get dinner. We went to this burger spot, and next to the burger spot, there was a pretty big fancy hotel. So the owner of the burger spot told us that while we wait for the food, we should go next door and we should say hi to his friend and that his friend will give us a free drink or something like that. So we ended up going over and it was pretty cool. You know, we enjoyed our drink, but as we were sitting there, I looked around and I noticed that there was a group of people. Everyone was reading, but nobody was reading the same book and nobody was talking. It was a silent book club. So there are so many cool things that you can sign up for. If you are in a smaller town though, I do see how it might be more difficult to reach out to communities in your area, but there are even communities that you can search for on apps. Two of my favorite apps that I've found are Geneva, which is spelled Geneva. Geneva has so many cool activities and so many cool group gatherings. Some are a mix of women and men, and some are married couples, some are single women, some are entrepreneurs. I love using Geneva. And another one that I love using is Bumble BFF. I have pretty good experiences with it, and it's a lot more digestible for me and for what I like. Sometimes I don't like to be around a big group of people. Sometimes I like to just grab an appetizer with a friend and kind of get to know them on a more personal level rather than it being unbalanced, because there has been times where I've tried hanging out with groups of people for the first time and it felt very off balanced. It felt like maybe 3 of the girls were getting along better than they were getting along with me, and that's something that I don't recommend. So if you do work better in a smaller setting, then I recommend one-on-one friend dates. Facebook also has a lot of cool events and friend dates. It's also another way that I've met another friend of mine, and we went to go get pizza, and it was just such a cool little date. So there are so many ways that you can meet people. The first thing that you have to do is really put yourself out there to do so. So as we wrap up today's episode, I do want to go ahead and leave you guys with a homework piece. It's very simple, doesn't require too much, but it does require a little bit of effort. Number 1 is to take some time this week in engaging in a solo activity that brings you joy and fulfillment. It could be anything as simple as grabbing a sandwich by yourself or going to grab a coffee by yourself and sitting inside the coffee shop. Number 2, practice self-compassion. Be nice to yourself. Offer yourself words of kindness, offer yourself words of encouragement, and remember that these things take time. And number 3, reach out to a family or friend or sign up for one of those apps that I mentioned earlier in the video, not sponsored by the way, maybe one day, or at least try one of the meditation apps. Do something that helps you either reach out to someone or at least to reach into yourself and to be able to spend that time with yourself. And I want to leave you with one more thing. I found a poem earlier today and it goes like this. Man can be himself only for so long as he is alone. And if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom. For it is only when he is alone that he is really free. Remember that finding solitude is one of the best gifts that you can give to yourself. You are so worthy of investing time and effort and energy into who you want to be, into cultivating a relationship to yourself, because we come into this world alone and we do leave this world alone. And the best relationship that you can have on this earth is with yourself. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope that you took something from this episode, and just know that I am so, so grateful for you. And I cannot wait to see you on the next episode. Love you. Bye.